Hello, hello. Welcome to part 3 of HughEhhoule's Surviving the West. If you're lost, you might want to start at the beginning. And special thanks to Weekly Creeps and A Clock Strikes 3 for lending their vocal talents to the story. Enjoy. If I don't miss my guess, you all are the type to scrounge every spooky story and morbid moment you can find. You've heard it all, from the classics so often repeated they are burned into your mind, to those obscure tales found on dying parts of the internet that only a handful of people have ever read. But I'd wager you've never heard of a horde. The type I mean, at any rate. You see, if you're hearing or reading a story with any trace of truth, you're reading something that was, at some point, passed down by someone who survived. A horde. It doesn't leave survivors. One entity can screw with untold people in the right situation. An infestation can leave a town a psychically scarred, cursed place for generations to come. A horde is a type of event that erases a place from history. Why? Once you get so many types of wrong in one place, the rules they are bending start to overlap, cover for each other's failings. A leader always emerges. Some paragon of evil that takes a few hundred powerful fingers reaching from the dirt and turns them into a massive hand that chokes the life out of anything it can reach. The mindless, led by the scheming, the insane corralled by the manipulative, those made of flesh and bone and forced by dark magic, and those that are nothing but ethereal mists spared the intentions of those who would look to send them back to where they came from. They always fall to infighting, attrition, or accident, dispersing before setting in motion events that could alter the world. But to be staring down the barrel of that weapon, when it's in full repair, my only advice is you make peace with your god, or accept that there isn't one, because all the piss and vinegar in the world isn't going to let you hold back the dark tide. Yeah, I know, that wasn't advice so much as a warning, but by now you should realize there isn't always a silver bullet, and if there isn't always someone who knows how to shoot. So, what are you thinking we should do? Kurt says. He sits across from me, early afternoon light pouring in from the windows of the jail. I laugh, a joyless sound that could just as easily turn into a frustrated sob. I have no clue, Kurt. I've felt 2 steps behind since I got involved in this, and for the life of me, I don't understand why. If I had more information, I could at least take a guess, but all I know at this point in time is this guy called in some serious backup. The reason is what is important, though. If Lem is in control of the horde, we should just move it on down the road. If it's aimed at us and intent on doing us harm, that's a losing fight. And even if we lose 3-1 trekking through the mountains, that's better than 10 of 10 dying hard in the street. But if he's just calling in a favor, that changes things. Then it might just be a matter of making things more trouble than they're worth. In that case, we have 3 main options. I ramble, and I know it. I haven't slept, I'm still likely a bit drunk, and don't quite remember when I last had a proper meal. Maybe this is the kind of situation that requires more than just one man's thoughts. Let's just say the noose ain't all the way around our necks yet. What are those 3 options? Kurt sounds calm and collected. Going solely by his tone, he could probably take care of the situation himself with a hunting knife and a lantern for when it gets dark. But we've already discussed how much effect spunk, moxie, or grit has when the shit really hits the fan. Easiest option would be for me to take a couple days and try my luck getting in touch with some things and have some pull in circles Lem runs in. I say, glossing over the fact that, for all intents and purposes, I'm talking about pacts that will have effects that last generations. Kurt cuts me off. That sounds like a whole hell of a lot like some devil-worshipping deal at the crossroads bullshit, Andy. I've never thought myself as a saint, but that just seems like trying to put out a cook fire with a stick of dynamite. Fair enough, I say. glad to have someone willing to scrutinize my plans. The second option is to go and find us any kind of doodad, totem, blessed gun, cursed knife, and dig in. I don't think I'll have trouble finding some stuff to suit our purpose. But if all I can find are a few handfuls of guns and knives that can actually make these things bleed in any way that matters, I still don't really like our chances in an open fight. Kurt is following me every step of the way, his unreadable face not questioning the absurdity of the situation, just the practicality of my solutions. That one seems a little less likely to get us on the Almighty's shit list, but let's see what else you got, Kurt says. Third option, well, essentially it'd be me trying to pit quantity against quality. I'd find as many of the most twisted folks you can direct me toward, and with any luck, a few of those will be a little bit less than people. Folks, or preferably families, touched by shit that can't be understood. They might have some mojo of their own, or they might be on good terms with something that does. The regular sickos offer them clemency if they survive the fight. For what it's worth, where I was trained, this is standard operating procedure when you find yourself screwed and far from home. I say this as I see a rare bit of emotion in Kurt's face. He's mulling over this option. I suppose if they do come on us in force, one less gun isn't gonna save or damn us. But how do you plan on finding these people you're so sure are out there? Kurt says. I shrug. I was hoping you'd have some kind of idea. You seem to know your way around this part of the world. I don't like the hint of begging in my voice. Kurt laughs and shakes his head. I know these hills pretty well, but I don't know much beyond them. I've heard a tale or two, but no one bought a cigar with a tail. That being said, I think I know someone who has some aid they could render. You heard of the Earp boys? My heart skips. It's no sure thing, but if I were to start looking for people who might be able to help us, a world-renowned gunfighter wouldn't be the worst place to start. You know Wyatt Earp, I say, trying to keep the skepticism from my voice. Never met the man. I was talking about James. James? Who the hell is James Earp? My tone is harsher than intended. A good friend of mine, though I'd like to be informed as to why that seems to have tied you Johnson in a knot. The man's a bartender, known around the damned world, and as such, that puts him in a position to know a vast amount about the strange dealings around here, and all the way to the other side of the earth, if that too doesn't put a kink in your hose. If I thought you were looking for a blowhard with a trigger finger that's as quick as it is itchy, I'd tell you to ask him about his brother. But it seems to me like you were looking for a man of brains and connections. I apologize for my fucking mistake. Kurt manages to give me a verbal beating while also providing almost the information I need. Point taken, Kurt. Where would I go about finding this guy? I don't apologize. Kurt doesn't seem the type to require, nor appreciate one. The next morning, I find myself packing enough supplies for a hard ride of a couple days. I tighten the last strap on the saddle and check for the third time that I have Kurt's hand-drawn map safely in the front pocket of the coal gray duster I'm wearing. I turn to face Kurt and see that he's holding something. Two things, actually. I know you ain't been impressed with the irons you've been supplied with, but I figure with you being on a mission and all, I'd finally do something to stop you bitching. Kurt actually smiles as he hands me two pistols. Larger and much better machine than the two firearms I currently carry. And what gives me more faith in them is what I see in the chambers. It's a far cry from modern-day ammunition, but at least what I see is a cap and ball. The slug is strangely pointed, much larger in diameter, and it doesn't look like it was made in a shed in the middle of the night. These are government issue, top of the line. If they don't stop what's coming at you, it's time to switch to a scattergun. Kurt seems proud, though whether it's pride in himself or these guns, I can't tell. Thanks. Don't worry, I'll bring them back in one piece for you, I say, testing the tension on the hammer. I start down the one dusty road left out of town, pit starting to form in my stomach. For the life of me, I feel like a kid playing sheriff who finds himself in the middle of a real crime. I'll spare the disgusting details of what happens when you take someone who has never ridden a horse and have them ride 1 or 2 days almost non-stop. I try to remember to thank Kurt for showing me how to make sure the horse doesn't chafe, but not sparing a second to tell me the same is going to happen to me. What I will go into detail about is food on the go in the West. It might sound like a small thing, given the paranormal shitstorm I'm in the middle of, but food should be something a person can look forward to. A momentary reprieve from whatever hell they're going through. It's why the military uses space that could be spent on ammunition to ship chocolate around the world. But that is the kind of thing that comes with abundance and modern supply lines, neither of which I have access to. So let's talk about hardtack. Think of the worst cracker you've eaten in your life. Now make it actively hate you, and you have hardtack. Can't absorb anything tougher than balsa wood and with a flavor that is bland by itself and overpowering if you try to add anything to it. Next on the list is salt beef. Most people who've never tried it and enjoy themselves over salted products think this wouldn't be too bad, maybe even enjoyable. They are wrong. Do you know what meat rust is? I do. And I wish it was some kind of metaphysical disease instead of an integral part of my only source of protein. And that's it. I've had to live off MREs for 3 months, but I'd gladly spend the rest of my life cooking the 3 fingers of death over ever having to consume another piece of salt beef. My insides are in an uproar, and I've long since given up trying to figure out if the fluid dripping down my leg is sweat, blood, or pus. But I finally see it. What very well may be my salvation. The town of May Gulch. I take a moment to reflect on the fact that I have no idea what state I'm in. My gut says somewhere like Arizona, maybe Texas. But you'd think I'd seen a sign saying so somewhere by now. If I had no idea this town was home to an internationally famous bartender, how does that even happen at this point in history? I don't think it would have taken me long to figure out. The place is leaps ahead of the dump I've been calling my home, but its crown jewel, as you can probably guess, is the massive saloon sitting at the end of the main thoroughfare. Its deep, red-stained facade was made of immaculately cut timber. Hardware on the batwing doors shines in the late morning sun. The patrons filter in and out, looking like folks that have found their steak and are looking to make their fortune, as opposed to the folks back home who will know nothing but the daily grind till they don't have any more days to grind. I'm given a few looks as I enter, not the least of which is by the man behind the counter. The man is in his late 30s, losing a battle with the baldness on the top of his skull, but the rest of his hair kept a deep black color. His mustache, a facial bulwark, seeming to take up a good quarter of the man's features and was meticulously trimmed. His eyes tell me this is a man who is quick on the uptake, and I notice the subtle nod he gives to 3 men who most would assume were simply barflies. They don't make a show of it, but each has a firearm trained on me behind their jackets. The inside is cleaner than anything I've seen since crash landing in the past, and the bar behind the man is stocked with what had to have been hundreds of different bottles. A feat in the 21st century, let alone when I am. I pull a note from my pocket, making a show of not going for a weapon. As I calmly walk up to the bar, I notice a few bottles of interesting ingredients for a bar to have. Nothing that would immediately raise suspicion, but I make a mental note. Howdy, I say, trying the phrase out. I hate it. Kurt sent me. Says you're a guy who can direct me to some unique individuals. I pass him the note and he studies it. Seeming to trust in its authenticity, he nods again to his men. 3 weapons subtly relax.
Kurt sent a telegram. Gave me a little information on you as well. Before you start feeling sore, I wouldn't have said what I needed to say over wires. Kurt sent you here. True. But he also wanted to make sure I knew who I'm dealing with. I'm gonna say, right away I think you're crazy. Not that I don't think there are a few things out there that aren't in the Farmer's Almanac or the Bible, but I think going around kicking those kind of hornet's nests doesn't indicate a man who has all of his chambers loaded. But who the hell am I to stop you from doing it?
James shakes his head and motions me to a well-crafted and reinforced door set flush into the wall behind the bar. His office is clean, well-furnished, and smells faintly of machine oil from a large oak table covered in small objects James has been tinkering with. I guess they are mock-ups of bar-related tools, but they look like they have more engineering behind them than half of the firearms I've seen. My ass gives me a standing ovation as I sit down in a chair with actual cushions. I'd make a point about how it's the little things you miss, but considering I'm legitimately fearful to the state of my hindquarters, its condition isn't really a small issue. I'm going to ask a blunt question. Sorry if it seems crazy or rude, but time is a major issue here. Have you heard stories or have you seen shit? I don't care what you've been telling Kurt, but I need to know. How close have you gotten to things that belong in fireside tales?
Cooksy, everything okay in there?
I hear a mellow female voice say from somewhere outside the door.
Just fine, love. The wife. Only one I let call me that. Don't worry about me being a huckster. I've hunted every corner of every continent to find ingredients for my drinks. You don't do that without running into a few things you can't explain. I've sat down with things that can talk. I've learned what to carry on my person to deal with those that can't. I'm not my brothers. I don't wander around looking for a fight and then acting like a hero for getting into one. I am the best bartender in the world, and to get there, I've had to adapt. I don't have a story for you. I've got a location. There's a gulch, about 10 minutes outside of town. The folks there? I'd bet my bottom dollar stopped walking the Lord's path a long time ago. I've never been myself, but I've seen them patrolling their land, and I've had chance to buy some of their shine. The stuff's mighty potent, and I can state for a fact has 2 plants you don't get unless you are real comfortable with the demonic. I don't know how they're going to react, but what I can tell you is the smallest of them stand 7 feet, and the worst of them don't even look like men. You ever fought something that big, Tex?
I'm convinced James knows what he's talking about. He lets me know just enough to know he's serious, but is keeping a whole hell of a lot back. A strategy I understand in depth. You know what they say, Jim. It isn't the size of the dog in the... I begin to vomit uncontrollably. I realized what I was doing about 3 words in, but didn't stop myself in time. I talked about how the fabric of time, despite our hubris, adapts just fine to things going back and forth. While it was thought impossible for a while, various entities have been known to pull it off. What doesn't deal well with paradoxes is the human mind. I figured this out my second night. In a genius move, I decided to try and earn a meal and a drink. I picked up a guitar and intended to plagiarize the half-dozen country songs I knew for profit. But none of those people knew how achy or breaking my heart may have been about 5 words in. Just like this, my mind started to focus on the impossibility of being the first person to sing the song. It jittered and shuddered, and within seconds I was vomiting bright pink liquid onto the floor.
I'd be angry with you, but by the looks of it, that is a liquid I've never seen before.
James says, chuckling and shaking his head. A bartender that's never seen puke? Seems a little far-fetched. I deflect, thinking of a different direction to take the conversation in. A cloud passes over James's face. His look tells me, in no uncertain terms, that I'm on thin ice.
Andy, a man's got to have a few secrets, but let's dispense with beating around the bush. You don't want to do business with me? You don't have to tell me everything, but next time you lie or try and walk away from a topic that could have dire consequences for me and mine, we are fucking done, Andy. I can understand that we are both men of the world and a little bit further, but if you keep treating me like I'm some 2-bit rot-gut-slinging shyster of which you have to covet your secrets, I'll treat you like the half-crazy, half-stupid mule fucker you seem, and send you out of my place the hard way, giving Kurt a good stripping down in the bargain. I'm looking you in the eye and saying that puddle on the floor isn't natural. I won't press the subject further except to say, you can think of it as my feet. We understand each other, Tex?
James says this in a way that is beyond me to describe, other than to say it was quite apparent he came from a family known centuries later for their grit and capacity for violence. Understood. No offense intended, and my story is long and stupid, full of paranormal shit that, in the end, wasn't even the wrapping paper on the shit-filled gift the universe had in store for me. For what it's worth, that puddle has something to do with time travel or reality travel, maybe both, and you are welcome to it. I apologize, realizing my natural state of mind has become cynical and cloistered. Nightfall came, and I was walking down a hard-packed dirt path to the gulch. Now, common sense would dictate that when you're walking into a crack in the earth filled with things God threw under his bed and forgot, it's a better idea to do this during the day. Not the case. With the exception of things that have a natural aversion to daylight, you want to do any scouting or wet work at night. Sure, they may have better eyes, but they still work worse in the dark. And scent, hearing, or any other senses they possess work just as well in the daytime. With this thought in mind, I stopped for a moment at the entrance to the gulch. Something strange is definitely making this place their home. All along the narrow, high-walled path leading to the crevasse in the rock, the sides were piled high with dead plants, straw, bits of refuse. As I try and remain silent, I feel like the walls could come tumbling down at any moment. No tracks, though, which is a good sign. Nothing has made its way out of this place in a good while. I'm not jumpy so much as careful, hiding among the brittle garbage at every noise, knife ready, low and eager in case of any ambush. This is a scouting mission, a friendly chat if I'm really lucky, but I'm going in prepared for the worst case scenario. I crawl the last few dozen feet till the claustrophobic path widens. A smile spreads across my face. To any onlooker, I'm sure I look crazy as hell. This place is lived in. Ramshackle structures, houses I'm guessing, surround a large central building. The planks are rotted and black. Tin cans and bits of long since dulled metal adorn the homes. Pale light, almost imperceptible, can be seen through the finger-wide gaps in the woodwork. I have no idea what is nesting here, but I do know it's smart enough to make a home, a very good sign for my plans of diplomacy. I see a hole in the large building and make my way, without a sound, creeping along the edges of the gulch. The stench is overwhelming, a feral reek that reminds me of a cheap zoo. I swear the entire barn-like structure is illuminated by a half a dozen tea candles, 3 of whom came to work drunk. The building is largely empty as far as I can see, but there is a single stable. The stall door is much too high. I draw my eyes up through the rough-cut wood. I'm about 12 feet up when something puts a long, equine head over. I see too many eyes, a white mane, and then nothing. I feel the flight before I realize I'm in the middle of it. I slam to the ground, knocked to my already damaged ass. At first, I think I've been blinded, but as my eyes adjust to a slightly deeper level of gloom, I see the black mass in front of me I mistook for the long darkness of Missing Your Eyes as something else entirely. Something I recognize. It's at least 8 feet, likely closer to 10 as it stands hunched, feral. In the dim moonlight, I see the massive bone-white rack of antlers, the elongated equine skull, so much like what I saw in the barn. I see the wall of furred muscle that is the creature's lanky, disproportionate body. The massive claws bear down on me as I roll out of the way. How the hell have I ran across these things twice now? Fucking Wendigo! I shout, getting to my feet. Crash course on these bastards. Smart enough to know what you're saying, evil enough not to care, and shrug off anything that doesn't have some serious mojo behind it. I bolt. I have nothing that can put a dent in the thing, let alone its family that are no doubt crawling out of whatever fuck den they're nesting in. The phlegmatic howl from behind me lets me know I'm right. I don't bother looking back, I just run toward the path. The entire wall of one of the jury-rigged huts breaks open. Another similar beast lumbers forward. Through the wreckage, smaller, maybe 7 feet or so, but still twice my size and armed with a massive, crude bone axe. Wendigo that use weapons, even fucking better, I mumbled to myself, a habit I find myself falling into more and more lately. The pot-bellied Goliath throws the weapon my way. It misses me by a country mile, but already the situation is throwing a curveball. What else should I have expected? I see more, crawling out of windows, perching on roofs. Twisted spears hit the dirt beside me. I don't have the luxury of keeping track of the freak parade appearing all around me. I'm about 30 feet away from the entrance to the path, at least somewhere I can bottleneck this swarm. And as I spare a glance back, swarm it is. I see at least 24 of the things in a rabid, loping pack. I didn't notice the 4-foot thing ready to pounce, a runt or a child. It springs at me like a landmine. I'm lucky. I spin, throwing the thing into a solid rock wall, gaining only 4 long gashes for the effort. I'm almost to the path and its relative safety when I see something above me. Bright orange lights. Some small, some large. At first I think it's some kind of magic, but the lights begin to rapidly arc down. The larger ones bursting into dripping flame, smaller ones clattering among the detritus and lighting thin trails. In an instant, the path is a conflagration so massive I could feel the wind as it draws in oxygen. That shit wasn't the offal of prehistoric caliber society. It was a trap to make sure that anything that got in wouldn't get out. In the now harshly lit gulch, the strongest separating from the pack, looking to take some kind of glory from the kill for themselves. I draw my knife, laughing and shaking my head. My plan? No idea. Put the steel between my body and the first one to make it to me, make a break for it and somehow get past the rest. Who I now see are wielding primitive weapons, many of which are bows of some form. In other words, die on my feet. The leader, or at least the best one in a fight, stands a few feet away from me. His gait is lopsided, his breathing seems a bit labored, but that does nothing to steal my nerves. I couldn't begin to guess its weight. Even in the light of a 20-foot inferno, he appeared to be a wall of flesh and rotting battle trophies. His claws glint in the light of the fire. Steel talons that I've never heard of on a Wendigo before. I'm crouched, ready, and I see the swipe start. A horizontal slash that will bisect me, even if it doesn't take my head from my shoulders. I bring the blade up, aiming for the claws to give myself a split second to duck under and probably get torn apart by arrows. But my blade doesn't meet the unyielding hand of something that could crush a Bowie knife like a beer can. There is a lot of strength behind the blow, but when my blade hits, it bites, shearing one of the metal-capped claws off and throwing the Wendigo's arm out wide. It's instinct that has me throwing the second blow, one that would have gotten me killed had this not been my first lucky moment as I wound up among the horse shit and horror. The second takes the hand from the Wendigo's arm. It screams, not some feral hellbeat, but a raspy scream of a very human individual that likely didn't have long to live, despite what was to happen next. I look to the hand and see the poorly sewn fur glove. I look to the thing I cut and see the tattered arm of a goddamned costume. Quislings, Arnolds, Edwards, bootlegs. There are dozens of names for them. Those people who become so afraid of what goes bump in the night, they pretend to be it. Rotten to the core, driven by fear and rage, they're more common than you think. I'm not dealing with anything more than severely inbred hillbilly dickheads wearing costumes. I throw the knife. It goes through the dry horse skull mask, planting itself in the brain beneath. The man drops like a stone, but not before I deftly yank the blade free and begin wiping it off of my duster. I'm breathing heavy. All the fuckovers from the M to my aching asshole boiling up to the surface. These idiots are standing in shock, like they believe their own bullshit. I sheathe the knife and address the crowd. Put down the weapons and bring me out anything spooky you own. Running is for monsters. You assholes don't even deserve a mosey. The alternative is... They cut me short with a rock exploding against the wall behind me. I've seen a few other versions of myself, a couple that strayed closer to Ed Gein than Audie Murphy. Nothing I'm proud of, I've always been a helpful kind of guy. Not these people, though. I don't know if I'm smiling or shooting first, but it's a close race. The satisfying crack of the military-grade weapons warms my heart. Not as much as the 6-foot idiot on 2-foot stilts the conical slug hits, though. The left side of his chest suddenly having a hole large enough to see firelight through. 3 more gunshots and 3 more blights on the west fall missing baseball-sized pieces. The archers find their wits and arrows fall around me like rain. I bolt for cover, putting my back to the wall of a half-collapsing hut. Weighty thumps sound from the wall behind me, and I start to judge where the missiles are coming from. Not hard to do when there's only one building that gives a vantage point beyond eye level. I pop out from behind the wall firing. I'm not aiming for any individual, just the area where a half a dozen of the scrawniest of the clan kneel, firing at where they hope I'll be. 12 shots drop the group and chew up the roof planks around them, sending their bodies slamming into the floor below. Even with the finicky, pointed bullets, I'm reloaded in time to see a handful of psychopaths just feet from me. The chambers of the pistols are hot. I smell a slight ozone reek as I unload the guns again, this time point blank. I'm sure you've heard of shoot to kill, shoot to maim, and shoot to wound. Not to toot my own horn, but I'm pretty sure this gunfight invented a 4th type. Shoot to terrify. I fire the guns like a featherweight boxer, all awkward angles and impossible momentum shifts. In seconds, I'm rolling the last of the latest brave group off me. His last-ditch attempt at a bear hug, getting him a bullet through the bottom of his jaw. I'm soaked in gore. All but one group lay dying slow in the dirt, their compatriot having an empty skull. But I notice some of the larger, or maybe smarter individuals congregating, stripping themselves of impractical costumes, arming themselves and coordinating an attack. Nearly naked, they still show confidence. While not the creatures of myth they were pretending to be, these were still some massive men. Their eyes mismatched or glazed over. They split into 2 groups of 4, trying to flank me. That ozone smell is getting stronger. I'm chewing through these morons, but the gun barrels are too hot to touch. Not that I don't take the future blisters to load a fresh 6 bullets into each gun. Spears come at me from my left and right, aimed well and thrown with intent. One clips my boot and I start to take this group seriously. Especially with who knows how many of their friends behind them, ready to pounce once I'm wounded. I raise my right arm, picking one barrel-shaped man with a long greasy horseshoe of hair. I pull the trigger. The shell doesn't fire besides a sad, snapping noise. My second trigger presses fast, but not as fast as the explosion originating from the pistol itself. I feel shrapnel scrape my face and see the tip of my pinky sail into the night along with chunks of splintered wood and red-hot metal. The hand is bad, but other than the obvious, in one piece. I'm flexing it even as I bring my second gun into play. The first shot fires a red-hot slug that has a short, looping flight into the dirt in front of one of my attackers. I manage to drop it slightly before the overheated, overstressed internals of the firearm cook off the remaining bullets. The gun is a mangled, useless lump, but at least my left hand came through better than my right. My knife is out in my left hand in a flash. I'm backing away from the group of drooling, raving psychopaths who are forming a semicircle around me. This situation has suddenly turned in a dramatic way. I'm backing toward the path, trying to ignore the pain in my mangled hand, ready to bolt once I have a straight run. I'm more willing to trust my leather coat against the flames than me, badly wounded in a knife fight against 8 giants with spears and short, brutal-looking bone daggers. I can feel the heat in my back as I parry a thrust slower than I anticipated. Blood loss, I'm guessing. The bitch of shrapnel is. It doesn't have to turn part of you to pulp to kill you. If one of those stray pieces of steel or brass tore the wrong artery, all of the badass gutter fighting in the world doesn't mean shit. I'm about to bolt, knowing the men, naked as they were, can't possibly be stupid enough to follow me. I take a deep breath, but before I turn I hear a noise. Slow at first, but gaining speed. I think, brain for a moment. Then see two of the inbred killers in front of me torn apart. I see rapid flashes from the top of one of the homes. Fuck you, Thomas Gatling. The gun of the same name keeps firing, gaining speed. Now faced with a wall of lead behind them and a wall of fire in front of them, the naked murderers are hot on my tail as I put a bandana over my face and charge into the flames. My skin burns, but the worst of it is kept at bay by the duster and leather gloves I donned. Every few steps I feel a hand on my shoulder trying to yank me backward, and I lash out with my blade. I see nothing but shadows, but as I start to become lightheaded from smoke inhalation, my attacker's nude form succumbs to the flame. I'm slowed to a walk, my sense of direction meaningless in the inferno. My only guide, the scorching heat still coming from the walls. I'm on the ground before I realize I stumble. Blood loss, smoke inhalation, blunt trauma. It all catches up to me. I struggle to stay awake, but as I see the flames around me dull, I know the next person who sees me will be looking at a charred corpse in boxer's pose. The overpressure of air rushing into the space flames were only seconds before jolts me awake with a sharp burst of pain in my ears. I see him about 10 feet away from the exit of the path. James, with a grin, totally at odds with the situation, shakes a flask and offers it to me as I struggle to limp over to him. I try to tell him of the army behind me, the Gatling gun covering the entrance, but my voice is a smoke-ruined croak.
It's all fine, Tex. We figured something went real bad once we saw the flames. Drain that flask. It won't bring back the fingertip, but it'll get you on the path to healing.
He shakes the flask and I take it, assuming he's talking metaphorically. I need to stop making assumptions. I can feel the itchy burn of the worst of my wounds closing. My throat no longer feeling like I'd been using it to store broken glass. Who is we? I say, stealing glances back toward the path.
The missus and I.
James says, calmly looking down the high-walled path. There is an army back there. Gatling gun. We need to get out of here and come back with a posse, James. I'm guessing your wife is some kind of desert witch or alchemist, and I appreciate the save, but we need force out here. We are outnumbered and outgunned. I say, not knowing shit about shit. Sexism is bad, kids. Remember that.
Oh, the fire? Oh, that was me. Thought to call me an alchemist would be a bit of an insult, Tex.
James says, patting me on the back.
No, the oddball and chain is a muscle of my operation.
And out of the shadows slithers Mrs. James Earp. She is 10 feet tall, but that isn't taking into account the 10 feet of flesh-colored, chitinous lizard tail trailing behind her. No legs, just a massive tail that I assure you can tear through a bunker door. The upper torso is a twisted fusion of human and lizard, not enough of either to make any part of her easy on the eyes. Where you expected scale, there was fingernail-like layers. Where one would want flesh, bone-colored ridges rose like melted wax. A land siren. This raises two things. My hope in the current situation, and serious questions about James. If you can get us to the barn in the middle of that town, I think there's something there worthwhile, I say, knowing the answer, but asking anyway. Bands of flesh cover her mouth at random, then stretch back, revealing a set of mismatched fangs as she laughs. Long, yet human-like tongue flickering out of her mouth with mirth.
I told Cooksy these weren't anything close to my kind. We should have gave them the boot long ago. But that's Cooksy for you. Soft-hearted and cautious. That gun of theirs look like it was made by anyone important?
She says, her confidence practically oozing. I shake my head, knowing what she means. To call what ensued next a battle would be about as wrong as it could be. Even slaughter implies some kind of order to it. But this lady, she blew through that shantytown with a force that would make a storm jealous. Body parts fly, screams get twisted and mutilated for longer than I think possible. And the lady, she takes every type of bullet, bludgeon, and shit-smeared shank they have to offer, most not even scratching her hide. And the ones that do, causing a minor wound that seals within seconds. James and I stroll toward the barn-like structure. The residents of the gulch able to focus on nothing but the 20-foot creature wiping their lineage from the earth. But it wasn't them that caught my eye. The barn door creaks open, wooden pegs squeaking worse than the last of the lady's victims. I could be wrong. It could be one of this brood that was too big and wild to let roam around. But the smell, petting zoo meets butcher reek, tells me I'm right. Behind the stable doors I hear clicking, and I see remnants of fingers, hands, and other less recognizable parts of the human body litter the floor. I open the doors, slowly, trying not to spook what's inside. It was chained to the floor, barely able to move. Twice the size of a Clydesdale crammed into a strange little altar/cage that wouldn't have been comfortable for a donkey. These fuckers were worshipping it in some sick way. It was prisoner and god for a tribe of twisted rednecks. Up close, its face was little more than that of an elongated spider. 8 black orbs studded it in 2 rows of 4. Its 6 legs are black and white striped and attached to a massive equine frame, ending in a set of spinnerets. It must have been standing at full height when I saw it. It looks to me, not with the rage of some bloodthirsty guard dog, but with a kind of pleading. Once your wife gets done out there, do me a favor. See if she's willing to help me tame a cult. I say, perfectly happy to have traded the end of my pinky for something we used to postpone reality travel to avoid groups of. But that's a tale for another time. Assuming I have a next time, that is.
Thank you for listening. You can probably handle another horror story, right?